When Courage Meets Destiny. The twin sons of Zirion cast long purple shadows across the rocky terrain as Marcus Chen checked his equipment one final time. At 16, he had already spent 5 years on this alien world, watching his father's mining operation slowly expand across the mineral-rich landscape. Today marked the first day of scheduled maintenance, which meant 3 days of freedom from the constant hum of extraction machines and the suffocating routine of colony life. Marcus shouldered his survival pack and headed toward the boundary markers that separated human territory from the unexplored wilderness. His father had forbidden him from venturing beyond these limits, but Marcus had always felt drawn to the mysteries that lay hidden in Zirion's untamed regions. The planet's ecosystem fascinated him with its bioluminescent plants and strange geological formations that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. As he crossed into the neutral zone, Marcus noticed the immediate change in atmosphere. The air felt charged with an energy he couldn't identify, and the vegetation grew more exotic with each step. Strange crystalline formations jutted from the ground like frozen lightning, and in the distance, he could see the shimmer of what the colony's xenobiologists called the Crystal Peaks, where rumors suggested an intelligent species might dwell. Unknown to Marcus, he was not the only curious soul venturing beyond familiar borders that morning. Deep within the Crystal Peaks, Princess Zira Keth of the Zarathi people was experiencing her own restless urges. Her golden scales caught the filtered sunlight streaming through the translucent walls of their great city as she paced her chambers with growing frustration. The Zarathi had observed the human settlement since its establishment, maintaining careful distance while studying these strange newcomers. Unlike her people, who communicated through subtle telepathic connections and lived in harmony with their crystalline environment, the humans seemed to reshape everything they touched. Their loud machines, their constant chatter, their seemingly endless energy intrigued and puzzled her in equal measure. Zira's grandfather, Elder Vorth, had strictly forbidden any contact with the humans, declaring them too unpredictable and potentially dangerous. But Zira's scientific mind craved understanding. How could she learn about these beings while locked away in the safety of their mountain home? Making a decision that would change the course of both their species, Zira slipped through the crystal passages she had explored as a child, avoiding the patrol routes of the guardian warriors. Her natural camouflage abilities, common among her people, allowed her scales to shift color and texture, blending perfectly with the rocky terrain as she made her way down the mountainside. The neutral zone between their territories had always been considered sacred ground by the Zarathi, a place where the planet's natural energies flowed strongest. As Zira moved through this mystical landscape, her telepathic senses picked up something unusual. The emotional resonance was different here, touched by something foreign yet not entirely unpleasant. She realized she was sensing the psychic afterglow of human presence. Following this intriguing trail, Zira found herself approaching a small clearing where several strange objects had been left behind. Marcus had stopped here for lunch 2 days earlier, leaving subtle traces that only someone with her abilities could detect. She examined his discarded food wrapper with fascination, marveling at the artificial materials and trying to understand their purpose. Her investigation was interrupted by a sound that chilled her very soul. A low, rumbling growl echoed from the shadows of a nearby rock formation. Zira's scales immediately shifted to protective patterns as she recognized the threat. A shadow beast, one of Zirion's most dangerous predators, emerged from its lair with eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. These creatures were the reason both Zarathi and human settlements maintained such careful borders. Standing nearly 3 meters tall with claws that could slice through crystal, shadow beasts were apex predators that hunted by sensing fear and feeding on psychic energy. Zira's telepathic abilities, normally her greatest strength, now made her a beacon to this monster. The beast circled her with predatory patience, its form seeming to shift and blur as it moved through patches of shadow and light. Zira attempted to use her people's traditional defense methods, projecting calm thoughts and trying to convince the creature she posed no threat. But shadow beasts were too primitive to be reasoned with, too hungry to be deterred by peaceful intentions. Just as the creature tensed for its attack, another figure burst from the undergrowth. Marcus had heard Zira's unconscious telepathic distress call, though he didn't understand what the strange sensation in his mind meant. All he saw was a young being in mortal danger, and his human instincts took over completely. Armed with nothing but a plasma cutter from his mining kit and his father's old hiking boots, Marcus positioned himself between the shadow beast and its intended prey. The creature's attention shifted to this new threat, its alien intelligence recognizing the human's aggressive posture. "Run!" Marcus shouted over his shoulder, not even certain the golden-scaled being could understand him. "Get away from here!" The shadow beast attacked with frightening speed, its massive form moving like liquid darkness across the rocky ground. Marcus barely managed to activate his plasma cutter in time, the tool's bright beam causing the creature to recoil momentarily. But the mining equipment wasn't designed for combat, and Marcus knew it would overheat quickly under continuous use. Zero watched in amazement as this young human faced impossible odds without hesitation. Her people were warriors when necessary, but they relied on superior numbers and advanced weapons. This human had nothing but primitive tools and raw courage, yet he stood firm against a monster that could kill them both in seconds. The battle became a deadly dance of survival. Marcus used his knowledge of Zirion's terrain to his advantage, leading the shadow beast through areas where loose rocks might slow its advance, or crystalline formations could provide temporary shelter. His smaller size and human agility allowed him to stay ahead of the creature's claws, but he was tiring quickly. When the plasma cutter finally overheated and died, Marcus switched to improvised tactics. He grabbed handfuls of the bioluminescent pollen that coated many local plants, throwing it at the creature's eyes to temporarily blind it. Each small victory bought precious seconds, but the shadow beast's patience was endless and its hunger grew stronger with each passing moment. The end came suddenly. Marcus stumbled over a hidden root just as the shadow beast made its final lunge. Massive claws raked across his back and shoulder, tearing through his protective suit and deep into muscle and bone. The creature's toxic saliva entered his bloodstream instantly, and Marcus felt his strength begin to fail. But his sacrifice had not been in vain. Zira's distress call, amplified by the intense emotions of the battle, had finally reached her people. Elder Vorth himself led the rescue party that came streaming down from the crystal peaks, their advanced weapons making quick work of the shadow beast. The creature's death scream echoed across the mountains as it dissolved into the shadows from which it had come. As Zarathi warriors secured the area, Elder Vorth knelt beside the fallen human who had saved his granddaughter's life. Marcus was barely conscious, his life force ebbing away from the creature's venom and massive blood loss. But his eyes remained focused on Zira, checking to ensure she remained unharmed. "Grandfather," Zira whispered in their melodic language, her scales shifting to colors that indicated deep respect and gratitude. "He fought for me. He didn't even know who I was, but he fought." Elder Vorth's experienced gaze took in the battle scene, reading the story written in disturbed earth and scattered equipment. This human child had faced certain death to protect someone he had never met, someone of an entirely different species. Such actions carried profound meaning among the Zarathi people. "Bring him to the healing chambers," the elder commanded, quickly before the venom reaches his heart. As the Zarathi warriors carefully lifted Marcus's unconscious form, Elder Vorth studied the human's face. Young, determined even in unconsciousness, marked now by scars that would tell this story for the rest of his days. The old Zarathi leader felt something stir in his chest, an emotion he had thought long buried. "What is it, grandfather?" Zira asked, noticing his unusual expression. Elder Vorth looked at his granddaughter, then at the human who had saved her, and finally at the dissolving remains of the shadow beast that could have claimed them both. Ancient laws and older wisdom warred in his mind as he considered the implications of what had occurred. "Child," he said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy, "I believe we have just witnessed the beginning of something that will change both our peoples forever." The rescue party moved swiftly toward the crystal peaks, carrying Marcus into a world no human had ever seen, to face a destiny that neither species could have imagined. Blood bonds and sacred rituals. Marcus awakened to sensations unlike anything in his human experience. The air itself seemed to hum with gentle vibrations, and he lay on what felt like a bed carved from living crystal. Soft, melodic sounds surrounded him, and when he finally managed to open his eyes, he found himself in a chamber that defied description. The walls were translucent crystal that shifted between colors, creating patterns that seemed to respond to his emotional state. Bioluminescent veins ran through the ceiling like capillaries of light, providing illumination that was somehow both alien and comforting. Most remarkably, he felt no pain despite memories of the shadow beast's savage attack. "You are awake," The voice came from his left, speaking perfect English with an accent that reminded him of wind chimes. Marcus turned to see Zira sitting beside his crystal bed, her golden scales now displaying patterns he was beginning to recognize as expressions of relief and concern. "You can speak my language," Marcus said, his voice hoarse but strong. Zira's scales shifted to what he interpreted as amusement. "We have been listening to your people's communications since you arrived on Zerion. Learning languages is natural for us, though your English requires much more vocal complexity than our own speech." Marcus attempted to sit up and was amazed to find his strength nearly restored. "How long have I been here? My father will be looking for me." 3 days, Zira replied. "And yes, your colony has been informed that you are safe. My grandfather has been in communication with your leaders." Her expression grew more serious. "Marcus Chen, you have created what your people might call a diplomatic situation." Before he could ask what she meant, the chamber's entrance shimmered and Elder Vorth entered, accompanied by 2 other Zarathi whose scales bore the intricate patterns Marcus was learning indicated high rank. The Elder's presence filled the room with an authority that transcended species barriers. "Young human," Elder Vorth said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's chest. "You have forced us to confront laws older than your species' recorded history." Marcus struggled to his feet, instinctively showing respect to someone whose bearing clearly marked him as a leader. "I don't understand, sir. I just did what anyone would do." The Elder's scales shifted to patterns Zira quietly translated as profound surprise. "That statement reveals much about your species, young one. No, what you did was far from what anyone would do. You willingly faced certain death to protect one of our people, someone you had never met, with no hope of reward or recognition." One of the accompanying Zarathi spoke in their musical language, his tone clearly argumentative. Elder Vorth responded with sounds that seemed to carry the weight of absolute authority. Marcus looked to Zira for explanation. "Counselor Thek questions whether ancient laws should apply to off-worlders," she said carefully. "My grandfather reminds him that courage recognizes no boundaries of birth or species." Elder Vorth moved closer to Marcus, his large, multifaceted eyes studying the human with an intensity that was both uncomfortable and oddly reassuring. "Among our people, there exists a concept your language cannot properly translate. Keth Nalar roughly means life debt that binds souls. When one being willingly risks death to preserve another, a sacred bond is formed that cannot be ignored or dismissed." Marcus felt a chill of apprehension. "What does that mean for me?" "It means," Elder Vorth continued, "that according to our oldest laws, you are now bound to our people as surely as if you had been born among us. The ritual of Shalthara must be performed, marking you as one of our own." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. "But I'm human. I have a life, a family, responsibilities back at the colony." Zira's scales displayed patterns of sympathy and understanding. "The bond does not erase your humanity, Marcus. It adds to it. You would become the first of your kind to be formally adopted into a Zarathi clan, with all the privileges and responsibilities that entails." Counselor Thek spoke again, his tone growing more heated. Elder Vorth's response was sharp, and Marcus could sense the tension in the room even without understanding the words. Another Zarathi, whose scales bore the deep blue patterns Zira had told him indicated wisdom keepers, spoke more gently. "Lorekeeper myth reminds us," Zira translated, "that our people have waited for generations for a sign that the isolation imposed by the Great Scattering might end. Perhaps your courage is that sign." Elder Vorth nodded approvingly. "The ritual of Shalthara has not been performed for off-worlders in living memory, but the laws make no distinction between our people and others who prove themselves worthy. However," he paused, his gaze intensifying, "the ritual is not without its trials. You must prove that your courage was not a momentary impulse, but a reflection of your true nature." Marcus thought of his father, probably working overtime to maintain mining operations while worrying about his son's fate. He thought of the human colony that depended on the minerals they extracted, and the life he had always assumed he would live. Then he looked at Zira, whose scales now displayed patterns he somehow understood meant hope and anticipation. "What would these trials involve?" he asked. The elder gestured, and the crystal walls of the chamber became transparent, revealing a vast city that took Marcus's breath away. Crystal spires rose toward the sky like frozen music, connected by bridges of living light. Gardens of impossible plants cascaded down the mountain's levels, and Zarathi moved through their daily lives with a grace that spoke of perfect harmony with their environment. The trial of courage, which you have already passed by facing the shadow beast, Elder Vorth explained. The trial of wisdom, where you must demonstrate understanding of our ways and values, and finally, the trial of heart, where you must prove that your commitment to our people is genuine and lasting. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, absorbing the magnitude of what was being offered. This wasn't just about saving someone's life anymore. This was about bridging two completely different worlds, about becoming something entirely new. "If I refuse?" he asked. Elder Vorth's expression grew sad but understanding. "Then you return to your people with our eternal gratitude, and we continue our separate paths through the stars. And if I accept? Then you become the first human guardian of the Zarathi, bound to protect our people as we would be bound to protect yours. Your actions would open the door to cooperation between our species, sharing knowledge and strength that could benefit both worlds." Marcus looked around the crystal chamber, at the elder's expectant face, at the other Zarathi whose scales displayed various patterns of curiosity and skepticism. Finally, his gaze settled on Zira, whose golden scales had shifted to patterns he somehow knew represented trust and friendship. "I accept your trials," he said simply. The chamber erupted in harmonic sounds that Marcus realized was the Zarathi equivalent of surprised conversation. Elder Vorth raised a crystalline staff, and the sounds gradually quieted. "Then let the trials of Shalthara begin," the elder proclaimed. "Zira Keth, daughter of my daughter, you who were saved by this human's courage, will serve as his guide and advocate throughout the trials." Zira's scales blazed with colors Marcus had never seen before, and he felt a strange warming sensation in his chest that he didn't understand, but somehow trusted completely. Over the following days, Marcus was introduced to aspects of Zarathi culture that no human had ever experienced. He learned that their crystal cities were not built but grown, shaped by collective psychic energy over generations. He discovered that their apparent telepathy was actually a form of emotional resonance, allowing them to sense the true feelings and intentions of others. The trial of wisdom took place in the Great Library, a crystal cathedral filled with knowledge stored in crystalline matrices that responded to thought itself. Marcus had to demonstrate not just intelligence, but the wisdom to understand how knowledge should be used for the benefit of all rather than personal gain. With Zira's patient guidance, he learned to navigate their complex philosophical concepts, showing an understanding of balance and harmony that impressed even the skeptical counselors. His human perspective brought fresh insights to problems the Zarathi had pondered for generations, while their ancient wisdom helped him see beyond the immediate concerns that often limited human thinking. As the trials continued, Marcus began to understand that he was not just being tested, but transformed. The experiences were changing him in ways both subtle and profound, creating connections between his human heritage and Zarathi wisdom that would shape the rest of his life. The final trial awaited, and with it, a ceremony that would either mark the beginning of a new chapter in interspecies relations or confirm that some bridges were simply too vast to cross. When two worlds become one. The trial of heart took place at dawn on the 7th day, in the sacred grove of resonance at the peak of the Crystal Mountains. Marcus stood in the center of a circle formed by the most ancient Zarathi crystals on the planet, each one humming with harmonics that seemed to penetrate his very soul. Elder Vorth and the full council surrounded him, their scales displaying the solemn patterns reserved for the most significant ceremonies. "The trial of heart requires no words," Elder Vorth intoned, his voice carrying across the crystalline amphitheater. "You must open your mind and spirit completely, allowing us to sense the truth of your intentions. Any deception, any hidden selfishness, any doubt about your commitment will be revealed." Marcus closed his eyes and tried to quiet his thoughts, following the meditation techniques Zira had taught him during the previous days. He felt the Zarathi minds touching his consciousness, gentle but thorough, examining his motivations and desires. The sensation was simultaneously intimate and humbling, as if every moment of his life was being evaluated for its authentic meaning. Through the mental connection, he felt their amazement at what they found. His decision to save Zira hadn't been driven by any hope of reward or recognition. It had simply been impossible for him to stand by while another being faced danger. The Zarathi discovered a human capacity for instant, selfless action that their more contemplative nature rarely achieved. But they also sensed his deep love for his own species, his concern for his father, and his genuine desire to serve as a bridge between worlds rather than abandoning his human identity. This complexity, rather than being seen as divided loyalty, was recognized as the very quality that would make him an effective guardian of both peoples. When the mental examination concluded, Marcus opened his eyes to find every Zarathi present displaying the deep golden patterns that indicated profound respect. Even Counselor Thek, who had opposed the adoption from the beginning, showed scales of grudging admiration. Elder Vorth approached carrying an object Marcus had never seen before, a crystal pendant that seemed to contain swirling galaxies of light. "This is the heart of Zerion," the elder explained, "formed in the planet's core and attuned to the life force of our people. Only a true guardian may wear it, as it will amplify your natural abilities and create a permanent bond with our collective consciousness." As the pendant was placed around his neck, Marcus felt a rush of sensation that redefined his understanding of existence. Suddenly, he could sense the emotional states of every Zarathi in the ceremony, their thoughts touching his in a harmony that transcended language. He understood without being told that he now carried a piece of their collective soul, just as they had welcomed a piece of his human spirit into their own. The ceremony was interrupted by a disturbance from the city below. Crystal spires began flashing in patterns that Marcus now recognized as emergency signals, and the harmonic resonance of the grove shifted to frequencies that spoke of immediate danger. A young Zarathi warrior materialized through the crystal transport network, his scales displaying the urgent patterns of a battle alert. His report, delivered in rapid harmonic bursts, caused every adult present to shift to combat colors. "What is it?" Marcus asked Zira, whose own scales had gone dark with fear. "The Devourers have been detected at the edge of our solar system," she replied, her voice tight with controlled panic. "A full harvest fleet, moving directly toward Zerion." Elder Vorth's expression grew grim. "The ancient enemy has found us at last. After 3 generations of hiding, the great hunt begins again." Marcus felt the collective dread of the Zarathi through his new bond with them, but he also sensed something they didn't seem to realize. "Wait," he said, his human pragmatism cutting through their fear. "What exactly are these Devourers? What kind of technology do they have?" The elder's explanation painted a picture of a nomadic species that consumed the life force of entire planets, using bioships and energy-draining weapons that had proved nearly unstoppable. They had scattered the Zarathi civilization centuries ago, forcing the survivors to hide on remote worlds like Zerion. "But do they have energy shields?" Marcus pressed. "Kinetic barriers? What about their ship construction?" As the Zarathi described their enemy's capabilities, Marcus began to see possibilities they had missed. The Devourers were indeed formidable, but their technology followed biological principles that had inherent weaknesses that human engineering might be able to exploit. "I need to contact the colony immediately," Marcus declared. "Our mining equipment can be converted to weapons, and our ship's defensive systems might be exactly what you need to complement your psychic abilities." The suggestion that humans might be able to help against an enemy that had terrorized the Zarathi for generations was initially met with polite skepticism. But as Marcus outlined specific technological solutions, the assembled council began to see the potential of combining human innovation with Zarathi wisdom. Elder Vorth made a decision that would reshape both civilizations. "Guardian Marcus, your first duty to our people will be to forge the alliance that might save us all." The next several hours saw unprecedented cooperation as human colony ships docked with Zarathi crystal vessels, sharing technology and tactical knowledge at a pace that would have been impossible without Marcus serving as interpreter and mediator. His unique bond with both species allowed him to translate not just languages, but entire concepts of warfare and engineering. Colonel Harrison, Marcus's father's supervisor and the colony's military commander, found himself working alongside Zarathi battle leaders whose crystal weapons operated on principles he was only beginning to understand. Meanwhile, Zarathi engineers marveled at human plasma cutters and fusion reactors, recognizing applications for their psychic amplification systems that had never been considered. Zira proved instrumental in coordinating the combined defense effort. Her scientific training helped her bridge the gap between human technology and Zarathi biotechnology, while her natural empathy allowed her to sense the emotional currents affecting both species as they struggled to work together under extreme pressure. When the Devourer fleet finally arrived, they faced something unprecedented in their long history of conquest. 2 species fighting as one, their combined strengths creating capabilities that neither possessed alone. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Devourer bioships, massive organic constructs that fed on life energy, found their usual tactics neutralized by human kinetic weapons and Zarathi psychic shields working in perfect harmony. Human pilots, guided by Zarathi navigators who could sense enemy intentions through their psychic abilities, performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. Marcus found himself at the center of the conflict, his guardian pendant allowing him to coordinate between human tactical systems and Zarathi battle meditation. He could feel the collective will of both species flowing through him, human determination and Zarathi wisdom combining into something greater than either could achieve alone. The turning point came when Zira and Marcus, working together from the command center of a joint human-Zarathi vessel, discovered that human plasma technology could be combined with Zarathi crystal matrices to create weapons that actually disrupted the Devourer's life-draining abilities. The first successful test sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet as they encountered resistance they had never imagined possible. Within hours, the tide of battle had turned. The Devourer fleet, faced with unexpected opposition and unable to sustain their energy-intensive bioships without their usual feeding capabilities, began to retreat from the Zirion system. As the enemy ships disappeared into hyperspace, the combined human-Zarathi fleet found itself victorious but forever changed. They had not simply repelled an invasion. They had created the foundation for an alliance that would spread across the galaxy. In the aftermath of the battle, as both species worked together to repair damage and care for wounded, Marcus stood with Zira on the observation deck of their joint command ship. The planet Zirion hung below them, its crystal cities now linked to human settlements by bridges of light and understanding. "Your people call this victory," Zira observed, her scales displaying patterns of wonder and satisfaction. "Your people call it harmony achieved," Marcus replied, his newfound sensitivity to Zarathi emotional states allowing him to sense the collective joy of two species united in purpose. Elder Vorth's voice reached them through the ship's communication system, speaking simultaneously in Zarathi harmonics and human English. "Guardian Marcus, Princess Zira, your partnership has opened a door to the future. Other species throughout this sector have observed our victory against the Devourers. They are asking how they too might forge alliances with the humans." Marcus felt the weight of possibility settling around him like a mantle. His spontaneous act of courage in defending an alien girl had led to something he could never have imagined, the beginning of humanity's emergence as a bridge-building species, capable of uniting diverse civilizations against common threats. 6 months later, the Guardian Academy was established in the joint city of New Harmony, built where human technology and Zarathi crystal growth had created architecture unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Marcus served as its first director, training humans and Zarathi alike in the arts of interspecies cooperation and mutual defense. Zira became his partner in all things, their bond representing the living symbol of what two species could achieve when they chose understanding over fear, cooperation over isolation. Together, they would welcome delegations from dozens of worlds, each seeking to learn the secret of the human-Zarathi alliance. As Marcus stood before a gathering of representatives from across the galaxy, introducing them to the principles of partnership that had saved 2 worlds and defeated an ancient enemy, he remembered that moment in the wilderness when he had seen a being in danger and simply acted. Sometimes, he reflected, the greatest adventures begin with the smallest acts of courage. And sometimes those acts echo across the stars, changing not just individual lives, but the destiny of entire civilizations. The Guardians' bond had become something more than anyone had imagined, the foundation upon which a new era of galactic cooperation would be built, with humanity serving as the bridge between species, and courage serving as the universal language that all beings could understand.